Hello everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about the 5th millennium BC. The 5th millennium BC spanned the years 5000 BC to 4001 BC. It is impossible to precisely date events that happened around the time of this millennium, and all dates mentioned here are estimates mostly based on geological and anthropological analysis. Communities. The rapid world population growth of the previous millennium, caused by the Neolithic Revolution, is believed to have slowed and become fairly stable. It has been estimated that there were around 40 million people worldwide by 5000 BC, growing to 100 million by the Middle Bronze Age, circa 1600 BC. Europe. The Crustacean-Tibelia culture, aka Trupio culture, began around 4800 BC. It was centered on modern Moldova and lasted in three defined phases until circa 3000 BC. From about 4500 BC until circa 2500 BC, a single dialect called Proto-Indo-European PIE existed as the forerunner of all modern Indo-European languages, but it left no written text, and its structure is unknown. Venka culture, 5700 to 4200 BC, continues cultural traits of the prior millennium. It had the earliest form of proto-writing, suggesting a requirement for astrological, scientific, astronomical, and economical trade archives. This provides the earliest known example of copper smelting in the Old World, imperial-like social stratification with communal spaces and large-scale trade networks where its distinctive figurines reach as far as Western Europe. The culture ends with abandonment and conflict circa 4200 BC. The distribution of Venus figurines from the previous agricultural revolution cements itself as mainstream art in Europe, continuing onward from the 6th millennium BC. Dominion culture first arises circa 4800 BC alongside the late Neolithic period of Greece, where increasing population desensitized are most notable. Over 400 years, Dominion imperially expands, later absorbing Sesklo's culture completely before the final invasion and destruction of Sesklo circa 4400 BC. The final Neolithic period arrives with the Chalcolithic period, an increased cultural connection alongside trade routes to Anatolia. Luralic languages and cultures continue to expand and migrate. The Lulaluba culture, circa 500 to 3650 BC, has been equated with the Proto-Luralic Odoamat alongside cultural relationship with the Combe Ceramic culture. Megalithic constructions continue all over Western Europe with increasing social stratification and social complexity. See the timeline. One most notable site is the Lech Moria Kur megaliths, the highest being 20.60 meters, 67.6 feet tall, and over 330 tons, and served as a site of pilgrimage and inspiration. The complex construction of such megaliths all over Europe are representative of the power of the social elite, religious clergy, direct communication over vast distances of land and large labor forces, long-distance eastern trade from Danubian and Caucasus civilizations to Indo-European steppe cultures with social stratification and wild shapes of their own. Considerable Danubian influence on Central European polities and cultures must also be considered. A second wave of the Nubian culture, which used painted pottery from Asiatic influences, superseded the first phase starting around 4500 BC. This was followed by a third wave, which used stroke-ornamented ware. These elements of imports and artistic licensing represent complex cultural developments. Alongside this, the infamous Varna culture thrives, beginning circa 4600 BC to 4200 BC, reflecting kingship. Hamangia culture lasts until 4550 BC. Its cultural links with Anatolia suggest that it was the result of settlement by people from Anatolia, unlike the neighboring cultures, which appeared descended from earlier Neolithic settlements. Such migrations represent strong communication systems between large stretches of land, political motives, and a further indication of the Black Sea trade, most notable of the period via seafaring inland. Mediterranean trade networks along forged with complex economic activities by polities stretching from the other trip to Portugal and parts of North Africa. See economy and Neolithic. The Statanello culture stretches from Sicily and Calabria to the Aeolian Islands, representing cultural focus on seafaring and maritime trade at this time. Sardinia has close trade relations with the Mediterranean Neolithic communities of southern France, the Liberian Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, and Sicily, and is a major participant of the silver trade. Trade via seafaring and ports between western hunter-gatherers in Ireland and cultures in Neolithic Western Europe, circa 4000 BC, Foretter's Cove. Neolithic Britain, circa 4100 BC. 4100 experiences rapid mass migration and settlement into the Isles. Deforestation on a monumentous scale in Neolithic Britain, 4300 BC to 3250 BC, associated with the Windmill Hill culture. Increased population density, outcompeting the West hunter-gatherer populations. First major Indo-European migration, circa 4000 BC, migrates southwards via the Danube, eventually reaching Anatolia. The Nubia migrations occur westwards onwards from this upheaval. The Nubian civilization and cultures such as the Kutatini Tafalia culture will survive on until the late 4th millennium, or very early 3rd millennium BC. Neolithic farming guilds and polities maintain a relatively fixed frontier in northern Central Europe, modern-day Germany, allowing Scandinavian hunter-gatherer polities to later develop into the pitted ware culture, circa 3500 BC. The Warrenfield calendar, originating from the Mesolithic, continues to be experimented upon and further alongside mathematics, which is developed across all of Europe by various polities continuously through the 5th millennium. Alongside megalithic monuments, or tombs with high social and astronomical importance to polities of the era, stone circles are erected as far as France. See the Karnak stones. West Asia, Mesopotamia. Ubaid expansion continues into the early 5th millennium with demographic integration of Labed culture by Holofians alongside invasion by Labed polities. One example of violence is Tel Apertia, a key economic hub of pottery manufacture. Another is Tepgawa, obsidian cedar, advancement of the potter's wheel, circa 4500 BC, silver cattle and copper trade routes for over a millennia are strengthened as a result of these expansions between Anatolia, Iran, the Caucasus, and South Iraq. Its chronology within the 5th millennium consists of Labed I, sometimes called Eridu, corresponding to the city Eridu, 5400 to 4700 BC, a phrase limited to the extreme south of Iraq, on what was then the shores of the Persian Gulf. The phase showing clear connection to the Samara culture to the north. These people pioneered the growing of grains in the extreme conditions of aridity. The bed 2 occurs circa 4800 to 4500 BC. At that time, Haji Muhammad style ceramics was produced. This period also saw the development of extensive canal networks near major settlements. New highly developed irrigation system, which seems to have developed first at Chogamami 4700 to 4600 BC, rapidly spread elsewhere. Labad 3 tell us Labad-style ceramics. Traditionally, this ceramic period was dated circa 5300 to 4700 BC. The appearance of these ceramics received different dates, depending on the particular sites, which have a wide geographical distribution portraying widespread trade systems and social stratification. Lebed IV, late Lebed style ceramics, circa 4700 to 4200 BC. Maritime trade via the Persian Gulf peaks connecting to southern Iranian ports and polities. Obsidian trade is most notable with extraction and transportation to industrial-style workshops over 170-kilometer distance sea. From Makar, southern expansions continue southwards to Oman. Overall, the Lebed period experiences sporadic but controlled growth of socially stratified settlements, with communal areas, segregation of classes, per quarters, and complex social stratification, increased conflict between democratic councils, large-scale chiefdoms, royalties, polities, and imperial-like inspirations, large-scale stone misery for public use, and organized seal stampage of international importance or associated characteristics of the era. Preeminent sees as a proto-royal figure, i.e., potentially Inki, preceding the priest-kings of the 4th millennium. Of the hundreds of polities and tens of important city-states, here are a few notable events. Included during the Lebed period, the site extended out to an area of about 12 hectares, about 30 acres. 12 Neolithic clay tokens, the pursuer to proto-cuneiform, were found in the Lebed levels of the site. The city was the major power, at least in the first half of the 5th millennium. It will go on to decline in sovereignty within the 4th millennium. It is here where the first kings of Sumer were said to have once dwelt. One major polity of the Lebed period is Tel Brak, a very large polity with trans-regional power with city walls, and the Tel Brak expansion beyond the mound to form a lower town. By the late 5th millennium BC, Tel Brak reached the size of circa 55 hectares, the remains of a monumental building alongside other large-scale projects erected for 2 meters thick walls, and the basalt threshold reveals a social elite of extreme prowess. Another major polity is Lorak, founded circa 5000 BC, experiences a rapid increase in dominance, establishing itself beyond earlier regional powers, circa 4500 BC, with the outer quarter of district first constructed. Lorak in its climb for dominance will go on to construct the Onu Ziggurat, circa 4000 BC. It is these centuries of careful development that gave Lorak its legendary dominance later in the 4th millennium, during the Lorak expansion. Some other polities of note are firstly Tapgawa, featuring signs of notable conflict during the prior Lebed expansion, weaponsmithing, copper trade, and notable temples built circa 4200 BC are present. Experienced repeated flooding alongside the other city-states due to continuous floods of the Euphrates within this era, or would later rise to great prominence in the mid to late 3rd millennium BC. Kogamish grew into its maximum size of 17 hectares in the late Sasanian period and was dominant onwards from the 6th millennium. However, the early half of the 5th millennium, the Chokamish main monumental building was destroyed, and along with its power declined. This became known as the Burnt Building. This destruction of Kogamish coincided with the abandonment of some other sites on the eastern part of the Sasanian plain. The settlements of the Sasanian period shifted more to the west, especially with the founding and rise of the city of Susa. The southwestern part of Iran, after 4400 BC, restarts urbanization, with large-scale settlements such as Susa founded possibly as early as 4395 Cal BC via Lebed urbanization and influence. The region around Susa in the southwest of modern Iran is located right next to Lower Mesopotamia, which exercised a powerful influence on Iraq and its neighbors from the 5th millennium. Susa I, 4000 to 3700 BC, saw the beginning of monumental architecture on the site, with the construction of a high terrace. Susa, alongside its allies, is invaded and destroyed in circa 4200 BC. The city of Anshan is founded circa 4000 BC, and alongside Susa begins to separate itself culturally from the west, developing the land with its newly integrated peoples into a proto-Elamanite culture and economic revolution. ulterior Middle East, and modern Turkey, strong Anatolian polities counteract the balance of power when the Labat polities and drowning Sumerians, who were culturally assimilated around 4800 BC. Such polities include Marsin, notably having a standing army circa 4300 BC, and Homakar, which was a major production center in the important obsidian trade and thus power. An intensive copper trade connecting Europe with the East, as represented in Anatolia by sites at Hosalar, Bosanitoltan, Kohosan, Ursan Lubitgatep, Alexagtepikasek, Multian Duduntimentitep, Nosantep, and Anstipol Furkatep. Prior environmental devastation in the previous 2 millennia may account for the lack of Neolithic sites in northern Turkey. In the Levant, Gusalian culture thrives, immigrating from the north into the whole of the Levant circa 4400 BC, with concentrated settlements and elites economically focused on copper metallurgy and trade, notably importing from southern Jordan's vast and powerful urban polities and Bodyan-like cultures. The Gusalian culture trades and correlates closely with the emirations of Egypt, and also seems to have infinites, e.g. the distinctive charms or bird vases, with early Minoan culture and Crete. Cypriot obedience are not seen, with Cyprus experiencing newcomers circa 4500 BC who arrived and introduced a new Neolithic era. The Soteric culture replaced the void of the collapse of the 6th millennium Neolithic culture in Cyprus. Trade with Levant and external regions on an impressive scale, covering large distances, starts to connect Europe with Asia on a more direct scale than before. Obsidian found in the Chokothiac levels at Galat, Israel, have had their origins traced via elemental analysis. The 3 sources in southern Anatolia, Utmias Dag, Gulu Dag, and as far east as Nomrat Dag, 500 kilometers, 310 miles east of the other 2 sources. This indicative of a very large trade circle reaching as far as the northern Fertile Crescent in Anatolia. And the Caucasus, settlements of the 5th millennium BC in North Caucasus, attest to a material culture that was related to contemporaneous ecological complexes in the northern and western Black Sea region, like the Lila Tep culture, circa 4300 to 4000 BC. These polities were immense economically, and pioneer copper, metallurgy, and trade. Constant immigration from Lebadians and from Lurek herself did play economic factors as well. Such cultural elements changed and are replaced suddenly during the latter first half of the 4th millennium BC, and the quality of copper metallurgy declined somewhat during the Araxes culture. On the other hand, the millennium-long attested Shulavari Shumu culture showed stronger cultural connections, like similar to Hit in use of wet ori, portrays intimate and centuries-old ties with the Holotheans. In Arabia, continuation of Labed economical expansion and culture since the 6th millennium BC, circa 5500 BC, throughout Arabia, with adoption and integration, but also contributions to these new political features. Labed pottery of periods 2 and 3 has been documented at Site H3 in Kuwait, and in Dusariya in eastern Saudi Arabia, which bordered the Persian Gulf, a major trade hub. Central Asia, North and South, central, a millennia after the Iranian farmer cultures had first cemented with ancestry from the Caucasus and Iranian Plateau hunter-gatherers, and Middle East, circa 6000 BC in Pakistan, and Northwest India, and migrations from Southwest Asia have resulted in increasing urbanization and increasing social stratification. Such cultures include the Jotan culture, or Djetanon, had housed settlements and had culturally united southern Turkmenistan to Afghanistan, existing for over 2,000 years already, at the turn of the millennium until 4600 BC, increasing heredity in the late Neolithic, i.e., Chigali Deb. Internationally, farmers increasingly grow the kinds of crops that are typically associated with irrigation in an arid environment, such as exploited bread wheat, which became fundamental during the Chalcolithic period. Increasing rapid migrations from Iran, with various waves, bringing advanced morphology and other innovations, but it was thought but the newcomers soon blended with the Jutan farmers. A large portion of these peoples settled in Anab, Turkmenistan, founded circa 4500 BC. Though an Alp culture beginning just before 4000 BC, contemporary with the Mazga culture, was a bridgeway between East and West, with considerable Chinese and Iranian influence in the use of its stamp seals in the great trade routes. Lapis lazuli was imported from mining kingdoms in Afghanistan to workshops. The Mongar culture in modern Pakistan was the largest urban and trade center between East, South, and West Asia. It pioneered metallurgy for millennia, tanning, bead production, use of the papyrus wheel, wax making, mathematics, geometry, medicine, and advancement of economic specializations. Glazed faience beads were produced, and terracotta figurines became more detailed alongside direct trade from polities as far as present-day Badakhshan for lapis lazuli. Mongar periods 2 and 3 are also contemporaries with an expansion of the settled populations of the borderlands at the western edge of South Asia, including the establishment of settlements like Wanagandai, Shurikanturike, Surikola Julapur, and Galagay. The trade hub already been difficult to control due to its scale would then receive high levels of immigration from West Eurasia around 4000 BC to 3800 BC. The term Surmic Mesolithic is used of late Mesolithic cultures of Central Asia during the 6th to 5th millennium BC in Russian archaeology. These cultures are described as Neolithic even though farming is absent. These nomadic societies, who had animal husbandry, had poetry via cultural diffusion and trade of the previous millennia from Lake Baikal in Siberia and from Europe. From their spread via the Donets culture to the Narva culture of the Eastern Baltic. See the history of Central Asia for more detail. Scattered nomadic groups maintained herds of sheep, goats, horses, and camels, and conducted annual migrations to find new pastures, a practice known as transhumanes. The people lived in yurts, or gurs, tents made of hides and wood that could be disassembled and transported. Each group had several yurts, each accommodating about 5 people. Ancestors to the infamous Silvo culture, circa 3500 to 2500 BC, inhabit the regions of modern Xinjiang. They are culturally and genetically affiliated with the Indo-European associated cultures of the Eurasia steppe, despite predating great eastern expansions from the steppe of the 3rd millennium BC. Tibetan cultures and settlements have been found, mainly in river valleys in the south and east of the country. Archaeological sites consist of those in Nurangshi County, Madag County, and Kumdo County. Archaeologists have found pottery and stone tools, including stone axes, chisels, knives, spinel wheels, discs, and arrowheads, alongside engagement in ancestral worship and priest classes. By 4000 BC, the Tibeto-Burmese cultures had reached Nepal, either directly across the Himalayas from Tibet or via Myanmar and northeast India, or both. This is representative of conflicts with the Sino-Tibetan language expansions. Modern Dravidian, geographically in India, peoples not to be confused with the language, whose history predates the onset of the Bronze Age in the Indian subcontinent around 3300 BC, inhabited the area before the arrival of other ethnic groups, like the Tibeto-Burmans and Indo-Aryans from across the border. North, the original homeland of the Indo-European ancestors in the Paleolithic. The northern and eastern Siberian cultures did not have any agricultural introduction or even pastoralism in Siberia during the Central European Neolithic. Its cultures is characterized by characteristic stone production techniques and the presence of pottery of Eastern origin via trade despite West Eurasian genetics. However, the Neolithic cultures of North Asia are distinguished from the preceding Mesolithic cultures and are far more visible as a result of the introduction of pottery from southwards. The Afro-Serbian population was a mix of people descended from a mother culture of Indo-Europeans in Central Russia, and from people who migrated back circa 3700 to 3300 BCE across the Eurasia steppe from the pre-Lemnian weapon culture of the Don Volga region. Such migrations including early Eastern migrations into North Asia from Eurasia, which started and occurred during the 5th millennium BC. Significant linguistic connections are made with the pursuer to the Proto-Indo-European languages circa 4500 BC via the Eurasiatic language and parts of the Dravidian language to a prior language family during the Upper Paleolithic. Dravidian having multiple cultural origins and development over millennia can be considered just as influential on an international scale as the Indo-European languages from the 5th millennium BC to the 1st millennium AD. Such influence has been explored. Such examples are the Elamo-Dravidian languages, a family that would have pioneered Susa, central Mesopotamia trade and politics within the Labad era. South. Some Dravidian cultures form with a interesting mixture of events between primarily Neolithic or pre-Neolithic hunter-gatherers in India and farmers from the Iranian plateau, sharing deep ancestry with Neolithic Iranian farmers and other West Eurasians. And indigenous South Asian hunter-gatherers, also known as Ancestral Asian South Asians, AASI, is distantly related to the Andamanese and other East Eurasians. These southern migrations into India contributed to parts of the Proto-Dravidian language having multiple variants, i.e., Proto-South Dravidian language. Based on geographical location, however, the language itself is known to have largely been native to central India as well. This melting pot of cultures peaked from the 5th millennium BC into the 4th millennium. Megaliths in South Asia are dated before 3000 BC, with recent findings dated back to 5000 BC in southern India. Cultures within central India had metallurgy, trade, payment of dues, possibly taxes or contributions to religious ceremonies, and social stratification explored within the linguistics of the era. Indian Y lineages are close to southern European populations, and the type of divergence between the two predated steppe migration. These results suggest that the European-related ancestry in India populations might be much older and more complex than anticipated, and might originate from the first wave of agriculturists millennia before the 5th millennium BC. Mundo et al. 2017. Bye for now.